Hello and welcome to this week's Preps Preview. I'm Justin Conn and this is Scott Richey. I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about basically what's the end of Class 1A, 2A basketball season in our area after last night. We had two teams make it to the Super Sectionals and one Super Sectional at Carbondale with two Topless and 2A and Dietrich in Class 1A. And you know, there were sort of similar games, but both teams fell behind early, particularly in the third quarter. Made a run in the fourth and just fell short in the end. Bad free throw shooting hurt both teams, both Dietrich and T-Town last night, and just and for two Topless, 4 years in a row, it's tough to swallow. I know, Scott, you had been at a couple of those, and it hits Andy Fehrenbacher really hard.
Well, I mean, the first two, have a last-second shot, for Pittsfield fall and lose, I guess 4 years ago now. Then the year after, their own last-second shot doesn't fall, and U-High, normally U-High pulls off a big come-from-behind win. And then, last year, lost to Harrisburg. That was a good Harrisburg team, so nothing, to be ashamed about that one. But then, year four, where now Carbondale probably holds as many bad memories as Springfield does for T-Town. It's got to be tough. I mean, on one hand, you can say, well, how many teams make it, to the Super Sectional, the Elite Eight, really, of IHSA basketball 4 years in a row? And the answer, I don't know for sure, but it's not many. And then on the other hand, though, you come that close to state, so many times in a row and not make it. It's got to weigh heavily, on T-Town as a whole. But and I know Coach Fehrenbacher, especially, has taken some of these losses pretty hard, and understandably.
And they're in the game last night late, and they come up a little short shooting. I think they're 1 for their last 7 shooting the ball. Their three-point stats in the end ended up okay. Cody Will got hot in the fourth, but overall they weren't consistent from the outside last night, as consistent as they usually are. They had Brett Meddy and Bobby Winthy both getting foul trouble, which those are their two main guys on the inside. And Nashville had a couple of big guys that were able to take advantage of that. And then they had the Thorson kid who just. I know that, he got some calls in there late, but he took the ball aggressively to the basket and made something happen, and that was it, which, going forward, I'm not sure what Nashville will do at state, but, it's heartbreaking for a T-Town team that's there every year. But, like you said, not many teams do it. Not many teams in T-Town history. I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. I had to go look that up for sure, but I'm not sure if they've ever been to had 4 sectional titles in a row like that before. Eventually, they're going to break through. It's going to happen.
I won't be surprised if next year's team, makes it 5 sectional titles in a row. Brett Meddy will be back, and I think as he continues to mature and possibly grow, although he's already pretty big, he'll just be a force for them. And it's T-Town, basketball's their thing. They've got all kinds of players coming up from through the junior high program into high school.
Dietrich was a little bit different, and they'd never been to the Super Sectional before. So I think there was a little, that loss was a little less, soul-crushing, I guess you could say, for them. But, they were still, felt like they had their chances and let it slip away, which, makes it a tough loss. But they're pretty young. I mean, they returned most of that team. They do lose Tanner Traub, who was arguably their best player, but, they have Alex Bonhoff will be back next year. Feldhake will be back. I'm like on the Niemerg's names. Travis Niemerg.
All the Niemergs will be back. Yeah, Travis, Lance, a guard and a forward. So they've got a lot of sophomores and juniors on that team. And the sophomores, went to state back-to-back years as 7th and 8th graders. And they've got, I think, another class coming up that has had some middle school success too. So things look pretty good for Dietrich right now.
Well, that wraps up the Class 1A, 2A season for the Herald and Review area. Ended a little earlier than maybe we expected it to, but, that'll happen. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of teams that surprised us this year and some players that surprised us. I'll start off, Scott. The team that surprised me the most, Dietrich was definitely in the mix. I don't think anybody expected that team to be a sectional title winner. They were, third, I think, in the national trail this year. So didn't see them coming necessarily. But for me, Sullivan really came out of nowhere for me. They were, I think, a 12-win team last year. I don't know that their program never dropped to that horrible 1, 2, 3 win level. They were never a bad basketball program, but they definitely just sort of dropped out of my radar at some point. I mean, they're usually 500 or lower, and didn't make much noise in the tournament, and or in the conference really through the years. The last big thing I remember about Sullivan was that year, the Meridian State Championship year. Meridian lost to Sullivan. That was our only OCAL loss. I think that was the only loss after Christmas that year for Meridian, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and then everything went back to normal after that. But this year, Sullivan had a couple of guys, Derek Stain, a senior, step up. They had Nick Frericks step up as well, and this had a gritty group. It was Chester Reeder's first year as head coach, and I think he definitely made a name for himself this year and really reestablished that program. It'll be interesting to see what they do going forward here, but 18 wins, the Ocala Valley Conference title, or tournament title, and they won 7 games in the conference. I mean, I think they had a couple slip-ups, but were really pretty solid. I will say, I bet Sullivan is still kicking themselves a little bit over that loss to Paris in the regional championship game, considering what Paris ended up doing. And I think Sullivan matches up well with Petersburg Porta. That would have been an interesting game. We saw Porta beat a couple OCA teams on their way to making state, but I really think Sullivan gives them I think they have a chance on that one, no question about it. Just like Warrensburg and Meridian did and fell short. But definitely a great job from Chester Reeder this year, and I think we had Sullivan as one of our teams, rebuilding teams, and thought they might lose in the regional semifinal at the start of the year. So definitely a step forward for them.
And my surprise team was another first year coach, kind of coming off a bad season. It was St. Anthony, but they were actually not coming off a bad season. They're coming off the worst season in program history since 92-93. It was the first sub 500 year last year, and they turned it around in a big way. Regional champs, 22 wins. Lost in the sectional final to Dietrich, but Cody Rinker did a phenomenal job in his first season with a group that really had 3 guys with a lot of varsity experience. Neil Williams, John Gackner, Alex Helscher, and the rest had played some on varsity last year, but didn't have a ton of experience, and they ended up having an incredible turnaround. I think they went from 11 wins to 22. So, and it's not something I saw coming at all.
No.
And so I just kind of, I don't know what I want to say there. It's not something I saw coming at all, and especially just that big of a turnaround in 1 year's time. So kind of who knows what Cody Rinker is going to be able to do with that program, but he's sure off to a really good start in his first year as a varsity head coach.
Right, and it's kind of easy to overlook what they did just because they're good every year, and then all of a sudden they kind of just fall off the map there for a year, and they're back and people go, oh yeah, St. Anthony, but man, I didn't think it looked good for them coming off that year, because it didn't seem like there was necessarily anything that was all of a sudden going to burst on the scene and make them what they were again, but here we are.
So. They did it somehow. It's just maybe just playing to their strengths. Neil Williams, John Gackner, those were the 2 most experienced, their best players, and they kind of rode both of those guys as much as possible.
A player that surprised me, and Derek Stain was definitely on this list for me from Sullivan. He was a guy that I hadn't really heard much of, and he had a really outstanding year. But I'm going to go with Jerome Adams from MacArthur. Jerome, was a guy who he was in the mix last year, but sort of at times you feel like he kind of disappeared or wasn't always a factor for them. And he really came in and then kind of filled that Chris Stone spot for them, a guy who, an undersized guy who had to play the post because MacArthur doesn't have anybody else that can really handle that, and did a great job. I really thought that outside of Bartley, he was their second best player, and just really took his game to the next level. He could do so much with his speed and with his athletic ability, and just playing smart, hard-nosed basketball, and definitely. To average 12.3 and 7.8, against the competition MacArthur plays at that size, it was pretty impressive. So, Jerome definitely, I thought he would improve this year and be part of their plan, but I didn't expect him to become their second best player.
Yeah, and he's a 6'1" power forward, going up against the likes of Michael Finke at Centennial, who's 6'7". Casey Elam at Centennial is another 6'7" guy. Just someone bigger every night, but he still put up the numbers that he did. So that is pretty impressive. But the player that surprised me the most, mainly because I had never seen him before, in person, was Arcola sophomore Colin Seaman, and I got a chance to see him in the postseason this year, and this is pretty impressive. You see what he does in the box score. It's like, okay, regularly double-digit points, but to see him in person, you kind of see how he does that. And he's 6'2", he's listed as 6'2". He might be 6'2", 6'3", but he's lanky, and doesn't has good length. It doesn't really let that affect his athleticism. He finishes strong at the hoop. He can step out, hit some threes. I think, and he's just a sophomore, and kind of a big sophomore class for Arcola. So I think as he gets better, I think he's going to kind of continue to be their best player. And as that class moves on to their final 2 seasons, I think Arcola, there might be something there. I mean, they've got some potential.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience seeing him, and having kind of seen him in the box scores, you sort of go, oh yeah, the kid from Arcola. But then you see him, and yeah, I was impressed with him too. That's a good pick, no doubt about it. We do still have one team alive in our area, and that's in Class 3A, Lincoln. Of course, had the upset, or not the upset, they almost were upset by MacArthur in the regional title, got by the Generals in overtime. They'll play Chatham-Glenwood tonight as we're taping this. They've beaten Glenwood twice. I think you and I both kind of feel like that's a game they can win and move on. Glenwood does have Peyton Allen, so it's not a gimme.
Anything can happen there.
It's not a gimme, no question. But sort of anticipating Lincoln Champaign Central sectional final, which would be a rematch of a game I covered earlier this year that Lincoln lost. But Lincoln is the number one team going into the postseason, so I guess they're the favorite in this one.
Well, I mean, they haven't lost since that game. I think they're on 16 or maybe 17 in a row right now, and I mean, everyone that plays Lincoln knows what they're going to do. They're going to run the 1-2-2, press you hard, and then on offense, they're going to take their time, work for a good shot, and a lot of times they're going to make that shot. It's just a matter of, can Champaign Central just throw them off their game enough where, they can't run their offense and defense, with the machine-like quality that kind of makes Lincoln.
I like Central as far as I think they're athletic. And more athletic than Lincoln, but they have good discipline, and I think they beat that. That's how they beat Lincoln the first time they played them. They didn't turn it over against their press too much. There were a few spots, which Lincoln's always going to have those few spots where they just get you. But I think if Gavin Block plays the way he did against MacArthur the other night, he's awfully difficult to handle. So if that does end up being the sectional final, I think that's going to be a real good game, and just as far as those kind of contrasting styles and the things Central does well against the things Lincoln does well, it should be a good one. Lincoln, it's been a while since they've got past this point, so that would be. I know that this is one they're really going to want. And
I mean, on both benches, you got probably two of the most or more well-known coaches in the state. Lincoln's Neil Alexander, got his 700th win earlier this year and is continuing to build on that. And then Central, it's got a new coach, but it's a coach people know. Wayne McLean, had a heck of a run at Peoria Manual with his son's teams, and they won 4 state titles in a row. And so maybe Wayne's working on a little bit of that magic, because Central had a rough year last year, but they already beat Lincoln once this year. They made it to the sectional final because they beat Springfield Lanphier as the number 2 team in the state. So it should be an interesting matchup if that's what we get.
And I believe they also lost to Eisenhower this year.
I think that's correct. So, I mean, that's kind of two ends of the extreme there, where you beat ranked teams like Lincoln and Lanphier, and lose to Eisenhower, who had kind of a rough year, but a little better though than last year. So, who knows, really? I mean, that's kind of the best thing about postseason basketball is like anything could happen. I got to see MacArthur beat Normal U High, pull a huge upset there, and so maybe there's another upset coming, or maybe Lincoln will just kind of continue to steamroll teams like they have since that last loss to Central.
We'll of course have coverage of all of it on hrpreps.com. Follow us on Twitter, hrpreps, and check us out on Facebook as well. We'll see you out at the games.